there's so little knowledge about these cancers. I mean, I only knew about cervical cancer, and I thought a smear was covering me for the rest. I'd just go for a bike ride and out would pop a quad, and now I'm like, where are you? It is a really big thing, and it's important to get the message out and create a sense of community where people feel that they can talk about it. We're so much stronger when we have other people to go through things with.
Kia ora, I'm Helen King, and you're listening to Cancer Conversations, the podcast you never thought you'd need for the diagnosis you never want to hear. Today we're talking to a former elite road cyclist. Kate Wightman was 29 when she was diagnosed with 3 types of gynecological cancers. Faced with limited treatment options, Kate was determined to raise much needed funds and awareness for gynae cancers. Not one to shy away from a challenge, Kate decided to walk the Te Araroa Trail. In this conversation, we talk about the shock of a cancer diagnosis, learning to accept help, the isolation of being a young cancer survivor, and what it's like walking the length of the country. A massive thank you to Look Good, Feel Better and Dry July for making this podcast possible. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to good podcasts.
Kate, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a privilege to be here.
And it's so lovely to meet you in person.
Yes, yeah, the last time I think was a grainy Zoom call where we were both in our respective beach West Coast houses.
Yeah, so no internet problems this time, which is very nice.
Love it.
So when I first met you, you were about to head off on this amazing adventure to walk the length of the country, to raise awareness for gynae cancers, which is obviously part of your story.
Yeah.
But I think to start off, I'd love to go back to when cancer entered your life, because I think that is, you know, for all of us, where there's this bit in our history where we go, that's when things changed.
Yeah.
So take us back to that moment where you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, it's a memory that is very clear. I still refer to it as the worst day of my life, but also the best day, because so much has changed since then, and a lot of it in a good way. But yeah, I was sitting in the doctor's office. I'd already had a minor surgery to remove one of my ovaries, which had come as a complete shock to me. Just got a phone call and I was meeting with the team the next day. So things progressed pretty quickly, and then I was in this doctor's office, and within the first 3 minutes he's like, we're going to cut to the chase. We found cancer, and not just one cancer, but 3 cancers. I had suddenly a stage 3 cancer in one ovary, stage 2 in another, and uterine cancer. And prior to that had been an elite athlete, incredibly healthy. So this just hit me like it came out of nowhere. I just remember feeling like the floor just disappeared from under me, and it, you know, in 3 words, your whole life just, it feels like it's going to change forever, and it does. It's sort of like everything you've ever known about yourself is just thrown into thin air, and you're kind of meant to kind of catch things. So it was just a really confronting experience, and I sort of felt like I was having a bit of an out-of-body experience listening to the doctor telling me this diagnosis, thinking this can't be real, you know, I'm only 28, what's going on? Hearing my partner and my mum just sobbing in the background and trying to somehow find the strength to just sit there and take in the information, because it's so hard to process all of that in the 50 minutes or whatever you get with your doctor. It's definitely a very confronting experience, and one that I try not to think about too much. Yeah.
Did you have any inkling that something was wrong? Okay, so obviously you'd gone in because you needed a procedure.
Yeah.
But was there any symptoms or any part of you that thought, this could be cancer?
In hindsight, yes. In hindsight, it's always a wonderful thing. But yeah, for sort of 3 years prior to that, I'd been having these very sporadic but very intense abdominal pains. I'd gone to the emergency department a couple of times. They said, well, it's not appendicitis, so you're good. And yeah, I'd been having sort of these funny symptoms, like bleeding between periods, and I'd gone to see gynecologists, and nothing had come up. They just said it's kind of menstrual cycle related. I'd been an elite athlete, so I hadn't had periods, so it was all kind of just seemed to be tied into that. And then I got an MRI scan for a hip injury from cycling, and they found enlarged ovaries, and that's kind of where the investigations began, and they started to take it a bit more seriously, but honestly not that seriously because I was young.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, it's probably endometriosis, and yeah, then eventually it turned out it wasn't, and things happened very, very, very quickly.
The speed things happen is really hard to explain to people.
Yeah.
As you've been talking, I go back to the moment where I'm in my GP's office being told that I probably got breast cancer, and then within a few days I've had that confirmation and have been confirmed to have treatment, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting in, and it's just like lightning speed.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like it's similar for you. So you're going from going in to have it looked at to you have cancer to treatment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a whirlwind, right? And you sort of don't have the time to kind of understand what on earth's happening to make the decisions that you need to be making. It was like it happened overnight, and I was having to make some very, very serious decisions very quickly, and I sort of felt just out of control in that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think about those, I don't know what it was like for you, but I think about sitting in my oncologist's office and him going, these are the options we have, and this is why, and this is the percentage, and just going, a couple of weeks ago, I just started a new job, and I'm, in my late 30s, and thinking that life is going to be a certain way. And now I'm sitting in an oncologist's office being told that the likelihood of me being here in 15 years' time is X amount if I have this treatment. It's just, it's really hard to comprehend even now that happened, and then you have to make that quick decision of, I'll have that treatment plan. I will go through fertility treatment.
Yeah.
100%.
And you're sort of having to become an expert very quickly and do research that, quite frankly, you don't really have the mental space for at that time. I don't really want to be looking up research papers on survivability of, endometrial cancer patients and ovarian cancer patients, because this research is bad.
Yes.
That's not putting me in a good space, but you have to be making informed decisions. So you're put into this weird kind of space in your life. And you're right, like, you're in this place beforehand where everything's going well, you don't know that you have cancer, and you feel healthy, and suddenly you're becoming this sick patient overnight, and that's a real shift as well.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, that shift from a healthy individual, and then the treatment basically is near killing you to try and give you, that survival. And I imagine as well that we've had that similar experience of being thrust into menopause as well, which is this extra layer of complexity of, younger people going through cancer treatment. So take us into that space of treatment where I'm guessing you're having chemotherapy, you're dealing with those side effects of menopause.
Yeah.
How did you cope?
Yeah, it's sort of hard to know, like, on reflection, how you did cope. I think there's this amazing survival instinct that just comes in and takes over, and you just go, I will get through this. Like, no matter what, I'm going to throw everything at this, and I will get through it. But it's incredibly hard. I mean, within the span of a few weeks, I had gone from being healthy to then having 2 surgeries, a massive abdominal surgery to remove ovaries, a total hysterectomy, you've gone from being healthy to being infertile, menopausal, and on cancer treatment. And it's like, wait, how do I process that?
Yeah.
So it is a real shift, but you just kind of take it day by day, and you get this weird survival mode that happens. But I think for me, the biggest part, and I think resilience comes part from a personal perspective, but actually part from the community that you surround yourself with. I think that's a massive part of resilience. And for me, it was about tapping into that community and making sure that they felt included in the journey, because actually it's not just hard for you, it's hard for everybody.
Yeah.
And so bringing people in on that journey and making sure that you allow people to, help you out, ask for that help, that was a massive part of getting through.
And I wonder as well, because you have come from that world of being an elite athlete, and there are a couple of things there that I think about where you are trying to control your body. I imagine there's lots of little things like, I just change that little thing, it might give me this, because you're a cyclist, and so I imagine like speed and endurance, and
totally
you've got that team around you. And what I think cancer does is it makes us realise that we have no control over
absolutely
at all, which I imagine would have been really challenging for you to kind of go from that to the space where we hand over that responsibility to our team, and then our well-being, we kind of, we're handing it over as well.
Absolutely.
To that community.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I always remember the moment where I was sat there with the surgeon and he hands me the forms to sign, and basically it says, we will remove all of these organs plus anything else that we find cancer on. And then I'm just like, well, I guess I just have to sign it, and I'm putting that in your hands and hoping that you do a good job and that you're experienced enough to make sure that I get out of this okay. And that's a really difficult feeling, to just sign over that complete control and feel like, there is no stability left in your life. You are just at the mercy of other people.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a partner and mum and dad.
Yeah.
And I know you have an amazing community around you. I think for a lot of us, especially when we're high achievers, it can be really hard, asking for help.
Definitely.
Yes. And also accepting it.
Yes.
How did you navigate that with a partner and family and friends?
Yeah, that was actually a really tricky point for me, and it's a really good question to ask. I tapped into the psychologist that I was offered, and that was probably the main talking point for us, to be honest. It wasn't the doom and gloom of, what if I don't survive? It was like, actually, how do I manage the people around me? Because I am Miss Independent, I want to do it all myself. But actually she was like, look, they want to be included, they really want to help, but they don't know how. And it's your job to bring them in and almost assign them tasks that make them feel useful, because, parents, I think it's the worst news that they could ever hear, that their child is going through something like this. And for them to feel like they have some way that they can wrap support around their baby and, help them, that's huge. And so just giving them little tasks like, can you drive me to treatment? Or can you sit with me and hold my hand while they put the needles in, because I hate needles, or whatever it is. I think it's really just about giving them little tasks that can involve them. And that was a huge shift for me. I was so glad that I had her to kind of coach me through that, because I wouldn't have handled it very well otherwise. I was just trying to be a pillar of strength for everyone, but that's not really helpful sometimes. They just want to be a part of it.
Yeah. It is really hard, isn't it? Because I was very similar, and I drove myself to radiation.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how you did that.
I don't either, it's insane.
Oh my gosh.
But that has been a learning process for me as well, of letting people in and letting them help, and that giving people a task is probably the best piece of advice. Even if it's, could you send a meal around via Uber Eats if you have that in your area, or if you have children, can you take the kids out? Or people would come over and clean for me, because I think when you're in the thick of something that is so huge and life-changing, that's not when the emotional work happens.
Yeah.
That's the survival.
100%.
And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what you need.
Such a good point.
Are people coming in and doing the day-to-day stuff with you.
Yeah.
Because the emotional stuff kind of comes later.
Yeah. That is so, so true. Yeah. That's like such a good reflection, I think. That you do go into this very practical mode of like, right, here's my to-do list, I've got to get through radiation, then I'm going to here, and you do neglect sort of the grieving and the emotional side of it. But yeah, having sort of the strength to ask for help is a huge thing in giving those tasks to people. Yeah.
It's massive. And I think that this probably feeds really well into your walk. So when did you decide that walking the length of the country was going to be the next thing that you tackled?
Yeah, gosh. It does sound a bit crazy on reflection. But it was my first round of chemo.
Yeah.
And I was sat in the chair, and I was probably 4 weeks post-op, and I wasn't able to train and go out on my bike and do all of the things that were so important to me and were kind of my outlet, I guess, in my previous life. And so all I was restricted to was walking.
Wow.
And that became my place where I would do my thinking, my emotional, my grieving, all of those bits and pieces. And it became a bit of a therapy for me. I'd get outside, get fresh air, and feel like it was actually doing something to help. You're taking some control back in a time when you're just spiraling out of control and it's all in other people's hands. So it was a really kind of personal, I guess it was just a place where I could go and feel really good.
Yeah.
But then it became more than that. It became a thought of, well, what if I was able to turn this into something really big that could then help other people on this journey? Because I started to realise during my treatment that there's so little knowledge about these cancers. I mean, I only knew about cervical cancer, and I thought a smear was covering me for the rest. Yeah. That was so stupid on reflection, but I didn't know any better. And then when I got in the doctor's office, it became very apparent that the treatment options were slim to none.
Yeah.
And that was really, really scary. And still is, because if it comes back, I know that it's a pretty limited realm of treatment. So I thought, okay, something's got to be done, and it's got to be something big. So why don't I just walk the length of the country, and that be kind of the goal that I work towards, and just get out for these walks with the view in mind of this is working towards a really cool goal. And it kind of got me through. I just had something every week that I would be, if I couldn't walk, I was like planning what my route would be and how I could involve people in charities, and that was a really nice thing to focus on, albeit a bit crazy. And I remember sitting down with my oncologist that first week of chemo and going, so I've got this idea, what do you think? And her just going, when? And I was like, oh, maybe like a month after chemo. And she's like, okay, I'm fully supportive of you doing it, but maybe think like 8 months or a year afterwards. Yeah. And that's what ended up happening. But yeah, it was a bit of a back and forth of them going, just calm down. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's also really hard to comprehend during that first round of what it will be like after however many rounds.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you're like, I've got this, man, this wasn't too bad. And then by round 6, it's like, my energy's gone, you know. It's hard. Yeah.
How did you assemble your team? Did people just sign up and go, yeah, I'll come with you? Or did you think about, who do I want walking with me? Where I imagine there were probably days where you're like, what on earth was I thinking?
Yeah, 100%. Probably every second day I was like, oh, this is I think I was a bit naive. But yeah, this was like part of my taking back a bit of control. I was like, right, I'm going to get really organised. So I made a spreadsheet, and it had every day where I was starting, where I was finishing, the kilometres, where we were staying, and it was basically a roster where people could drop in their names and come and walk with me. So I had just friends and family pop their names in, and then suddenly when we started advertising I was going to do this, just people from the community that I didn't know, they started putting their names in and they would turn up. And then I just met people out there on the trail that I walked with. So it was a real just coming together of a whole load of different people that resonated with kind of what I was walking for in some way. Yeah, I met some beautiful people with tragic and amazing stories as well. Yeah.
Because I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like what I've learned with cancer. I mean, my mother had uterine cancer a long time ago, and so that was our family's first introduction, I guess, to, you know, someone really close. But then you start learning that I feel like cancer hits everyone in some way.
100%. Yeah, you start to realise that, you know, somebody's sister, mother, daughter, brother, whatever, everybody's been touched by it in some way, and they have some connection to it and some story, and you start to realise that it is a really big thing, and it's important to get the message out and create a sense of community where people feel that they can talk about it, because it is really difficult, and for people that aren't connected to it, they don't understand the impact that it has on a family, even if you're not the one going through it. It's huge. Yeah.
Watching you via social media was like, you are such a positive up person. What kept you going in that way? And I'm assuming at some points there may have been times where you were just really tired. Like, talk me through that. What kept you so up?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, I mean, I think I've always been a bit of a glass half full person.
Yeah.
But after getting the diagnosis and going through treatment, you go through a massive perspective change. And it's like, wow, I'm so privileged to be alive, but I'm also privileged to be healthy and able to do this. And I think I tried to take that lens into it, you know, I get to do this. Like, there were days where I was sat in the hospital and I thought, I don't know if I will have a normal life ever again, or, you know, be able to do any of the things I wanted to do. So even though it would be really difficult, like slogging up a mountain, I get to the top and go, holy moly, like, I get to do this, and that's amazing. So it was kind of that kept me going. It was just, wow, I get to still be here. And I just felt like there was this bigger thing that I was walking for, you know. It was so many people were engaged in the story, but also became aware of gynae cancer because I was talking about it, and that felt like, wow, I've got to do this and get to the end because this matters to so many people, and that was really powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what you were saying before about resilience, because I've learned a lot about resilience, I think, from having cancer and going through other events. And I always thought resilience was, it's just people who get through it and they're always up and that sort of thing. But what I've learned, for me, the resilience is the ability to keep going, even when it feels like there may not be hope, or
100%.
You don't know what's on the other side. And I was really curious as you're talking whether that's been your experience.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's a really good way to look at it. And I think being an athlete, you know, you kind of teach yourself those skills, or you get taught those skills, and it's, you know, you go through a training session, for example, and you know it's going to be hard, and you know you're going to be on your hands and knees afterwards, and you're probably not looking in your best state, but the feeling after that usually feels really good. So that's kind of the lens I would take. It was like, it might be really hard now. And I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but it's probably going to be better than how I'm feeling now. And I kind of like cling on to that. And, you know, every round of chemo, you're like, this really sucks for a few days, but in 3 days, I'm going to be feeling great. And that's kind of what you just work towards, and you just keep plugging away at to get there.
And I think I feel like hope is a really big part
So
of
powerful. Yeah.
that. Like just going, yeah, it's really bad right now. And I was the same with chemo, where I knew those 3 or 4 days we were
Just like, don't talk to me.
It's so
Just,
awful.
Yeah.
So awful. But I knew by a certain date that I would be able to get out of bed and walk to my shops and have a coffee at the coffee shop, because the people I started to get to know, and that, you know, they'd say hello and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so hope and I guess that will to keep pushing forward, sometimes for me hasn't been about the big stuff. It's been about really loving the small things.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Hugely.
how nice is it to have a mundane life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how nice is it to just taste, like, be able to taste this coffee, because, you know, you lose your taste during chemo and you're like, I wanted to comfort eat, and that, you know, I can't even do that because everything tastes
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just appreciating those really small things, and just feeling comfortable and your joints not cracking, and suddenly you're just appreciating every little moment. And there's some beauty in that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your partner before, and they walked with you for a lot of the time, or the whole time?
Part of the time,
Yeah.
So Dan is, or at the time was in elite cycling as well. So he was overseas when I started the walk.
Wow.
And then came in and did sort of a week here or there. But it turns out that elite cycling doesn't necessarily translate to walking the length of the country with a backpack. So he was like, I'm going to tap out after a week, have a break, come back in. Which was awesome, because it was like something really to look forward to when we had those, you know, week stints together. So he did manage to walk a few weeks with me, which was very special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going through cancer, I mean, we've both sort of touched on the fact that it does impact more than just us. It impacts our families, our communities. Going through that at a young age with a partner, I don't think either of you would have even anticipated serious illness being part of things.
Absolutely not.
At that stage.
Yeah.
How has it impacted your relationship?
Yeah, it's been massive. And I think it's nothing you can prepare for at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we got the diagnosis, and that day we were having to make decisions about freezing eggs. And weighing up, you know, freezing eggs versus my survivability.
Yeah.
And those are very difficult conversations to be having at a time when you feel like you're spinning out of control.
Yeah.
So it was a very confronting thing from the start.
Yeah.
And just, I think having those conversations has really just strengthened us so much more. We really understand how we communicate in difficult situations, and we just have this love that's, it feels unbreakable now, because we know what it's like to feel like you're going to lose somebody.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And at that age, gosh, you can't even imagine what it's going to be like to lose somebody, and have to have conversations about, putting together a will at 28, you know. I all of a sudden was like, right, we've got to put things in both of our names just in case. We've got to be making sure that everything's documented, and that's a huge shift. It becomes more of a practical relationship for a moment than than a loving one, because you're like, right, just got to get things in motion. So there was a lot of confronting conversations, but it's only strengthened us, because we kind of leant into that and made sure that we were there for each other, and, realised that we were both going through a hard time, and we had to kind of be each other's backbone. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I mean, you've been through this huge thing with cancer. You did an amazing thing by walking the length of the country and, giving people a place to talk and to acknowledge that so many of us have been impacted by cancer and gynae cancers.
Yeah.
What is life like now that all of this is sort of settled down?
Great question. It's been a shift for sure. I think I mean, coming off an amazing walk and a journey and being part of something that was bigger than just me was, I mean, that was just an absolute high. And then coming back into, I guess, normal life, if you will. It is a real shift. And I think, like we were talking about before, when you're going through treatment in that kind of first year after cancer, it is very much survivability, practical side of things. And then I think the grief and the emotional side of things, it kind of settles in once the dust has settled.
Absolutely.
And so it's been a lot of, working through that side of things as well, actually reflecting on what on earth just happened. You start to realise that your body's probably not going to be returning to what it was, and I think that's a real big mindset shift. Particularly now that I'm going through menopause, which is something that I hadn't considered. You're in the doctor's office, you get told you've got cancer, but gosh, you're not thinking about how menopause is going to impact your life. You're like, if I survive and I'm going through menopause, great, because I'm alive. But that's impacted me more than I thought it would. Just in terms of like brain fog and memory loss and not being able to build muscle as much as I used to be able to, which is a real shift for me, because I was like, I'd just go for a bike ride and out would pop a quad, and now I'm like, where are you? So things are definitely different, but then again, my outlook on life is different, and I feel just genuinely so lucky to just be here and just be getting to do the mundane things, even if things are a bit different.
I think that grief is really important to acknowledge, because when you're a younger person that has gone through something like cancer, it impacts the options that we have. And also our peers are often not going through that. So they may be facing the opposite, like settling down and having children or buying houses or all of that stuff. And it's really difficult when those things that I guess society says will happen to you because of your gender and those sorts of things don't happen, and all of a sudden it can be quite an isolating feeling.
Definitely.
Because you're going through this sort of emotional thing where on the one side, you're so grateful that you're alive, but on the other hand, the person you were before you were told you have cancer is gone. That person no longer exists. And then the future you thought would happen no longer exists. And so it's that really hard navigation of, well, how on earth do I not let this suck me under?
Absolutely.
What has helped you in that? What have you done that has sort of supported you in those moments?
I think it's a really difficult thing, and it's an ongoing thing, to be honest, particularly around the fertility, especially as I'm at an age where all of my friends are having children. And as happy as I am for them, genuinely happy, it is difficult to watch them go through something that you will never get to go through, particularly if it's something you really wanted. So it's definitely something that's, an ongoing process. But I think it's just helped to be open and honest with conversations with my partner, with my parents around that, but also with my friends, they want to include me in their pregnancies and, having children, and I have to be open and honest and, tell them when things might be a bit uncomfortable for me, or, I have to be honest with myself when I probably just need to take a step back and take a breather. And so I think, having those conversations is really important. That's helped me, and just reaching out to other people in the community, finding people going through a similar journey, and there's not many, so it's been quite difficult to find, but they've been such just rocks for, having someone that can empathise with the journey and say, it sucks, and let's just have like a big, we'll just complain about it together and then we can get on with our lives. But it's nice to have those people that you can lean on that get it for sure.
Absolutely. And laugh at some of the stuff that is actually
Totally.
kind of traumatic.
Yeah. Suddenly trauma becomes funny, like the
does.
worst things. And you're like telling people that haven't been through cancer and had this journey and they just look at you, oh my gosh, that's horrific. But suddenly you're like, wow, I thought it was quite funny actually, when my bowel fell out or, whatever.
Yes. That time I almost shit my pants.
Yeah. Or I did.
Because chemo was so, I know,
Yeah.
there's just so many things that you kind of have to laugh at. Otherwise,
Oh,
so
massively. It gets to a point where you're like, well, so much bad stuff's happened, I might as well just laugh at it. Yeah.
yes.
Exactly.
It's so nice to be able to sit down and get that, like, overall story of, the cancer and the walk and now. If there is someone that's listening and they're really struggling, because there are those points in our treatment that can be really hard, what's something that helped you that might help someone else?
Yeah, I think the main thing, and we've touched on it a bit, but is really tapping into that community. We're so much stronger when we have other people to go through things with, and that might be your immediate circle, partner, parents, friends, extended family, but it might also be actually tapping into networks that exist with people going through similar journeys, so that you can talk about it with people that understand and can provide support. And I think I was really intentional about, tapping into all of the support available to me, the psychologist, the different health practitioners, and then joining Facebook groups and coming to Look Good, Feel Better and, joining a group of positive people to make ourselves feel good, and, just doing those small things with different groups of people that's going to make you feel a little bit better during the journey. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's such a privilege to sort of be able to witness someone else's difficult times, but with such grace.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such an honour to be here. I'm so stoked to be asked to talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, very important questions that I think you've asked today. Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. If you want to find out more about what's on offer from Look Good, Feel Better, head over to www.lgfb.co.nz and join me next week for another cancer conversation.